Hello, dear listeners. This is our second episode on William H. Gass's 1995 novel, The Tunnel. We're covering chapters 4, 5, and 6, entitled Today I Began to Dig, Mad Meg, and Why Windows Are Important to Me. We cover quite a lot of ground on this episode, from Kohler's lectures on quarrels, to his bored history students, to his possibly repressed relationship with his former mentor, the sophist extraordinaire Mad Meg, and finally the appeal of voyeurism, both from a generational perspective and also a psychoanalytic one. I also managed to work in a Stephen King quotation when we talk about that in a way that I think is quite interesting from a comparative perspective. We also talk about how Gass chooses to render intrusive thoughts and feelings using unattributed and untagged dialogue, as well as moments when Kohler's odiousness is rendered not as relatable or justified exactly, but explainable. It's a pretty great episode, if you don't mind me saying so. As always, we hope you enjoy the conversation. Welcome back to the Infinite Library podcast, dear listeners. I'm your host, Ben.
And I'm your host, John.
And we are at episode 2 of our The Tunnel coverage by William H. Gass. Hopefully you've joined us for episode 1, but if you haven't, we're glad to have you.
You might want to go back and listen to episode 1. Or not. It's up to you.
Or not, as we'll get into. Now, John, I have a question. I find when I start talking about this book, I just feel like I'm becoming like a Dalkey Archive hype beast, where like by the end of this series, I'm going to be wearing like a little Dalkey Archive tote bag, and I'm going to have like a John Fosse hat.
And I'm going to be like Fosse Subtology beanie.
Yeah. And I'm going to be like, I always keep it 100. And then I'm going to hold up like 2 copies of The Tunnel next to either of my ears. And the reason I'm saying this is because anytime I start talking about this book, I quickly become incoherent. But I feel like at this stage of the book, things have started to settle down. And so I'm wondering, before we start, how do you feel about it now? Because I think we opened the last episode, I distinctly remember you saying you felt like you'd been punched in the face. I wonder if that feeling carried over, or maybe has it settled? How are you feeling?
Yeah, I did find myself thinking about that as I was working through the second kind of section here, or the second like batch of 3 chapters, so to speak. Because that first section was very disorienting, particularly like kind of getting a feel for like what Gass is doing here with like, again, stuff that you just don't see happening a lot in even literary, like highbrow literary fiction, with the way he's playing around with font and with like page layout in a way that like really the only book I can think of that I've read that like does that to the same extent is maybe like House of Leaves by Danielewski. Which is a book I have very mixed feelings on, but not important at the moment. I feel like here on the second section, I feel like I have a much better, I think, understanding of this character and kind of what he's supposed to, what his deal is, what I'm kind of watching him go through. I have a better idea of like kind of what his narrative voice is. I think I have like a better grasp on like what the point of this book is.
Nice.
Maybe not entirely, but it's like I'm not going in completely blind the way that maybe I kind of felt like I was a month ago. So I feel like this is definitely like, I feel like I got through this section a bit quicker. I don't quite know if I want to say like it feels like the book has gotten a little more conventional. That doesn't quite feel right. I feel like it's more just me getting comfortable. But like this section felt a little more straightforward in a way, insofar as this book can be straightforward, which is, we're grading on a curve here.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's a good point. And I feel like I was thinking about this stretch, which we'll put in the episode description, but I can mention now we're reading Today I Began to Dig, which is chapter 4, and then chapter 5, which is about Mad Meg. Mad Meg and the Maelstrom. I feel compelled to say it every time. And then chapter 6, why windows are important to me. And I feel like this is the stuff that I remember the most. And I think this maybe has to do with what you're saying. Like, it doesn't feel like the story or the form is constantly like tearing itself apart in the way it does in that like opening bit where like he'll start writing something and then like immediately interrupt himself, or like then suddenly you'll be looking at like a cartoon and you'll be like, why am I looking at this?
There's a reference to a cartoon in this section, and I'm a little like disappointed and gassed that he just describes it to us instead of actually having it drawn and portrayed for us in the pages of the book.
Yeah, you're talking about the sex cartoon?
Yes.
Okay, I want to save that for later because I had a kind of like not to say it's like Christopher Nolan, but it felt like I was looking at the spinning top at the end of Inception when I got to the sex cartoon, and I was like, oh my God, because I didn't remember that like at all. So, and we'll get to what we think it means, but I'm glad you pointed that out now. So let's circle back. But yeah, like he didn't draw that, I think, for disappointing reasons, but perhaps obvious reasons. So yeah. But yeah, like I don't think like there's still weird things that are going on with memory in this, but it's less like frantic maybe is the word I would use, or less like frenzied, as it feels like, at least in maybe the first chapter or two of the tunnel. So
yeah, and it's interesting because we kind of start this like section with Kohler kind of getting down to business, so to speak, like he's actually digging. And so it does almost feel like we're kind of watching this character like get a little more coherent because he's expending some of this manic energy digging this stupid tunnel. And so his his verbal like efforts are a little more contained because like some of his energy is being like off vented into the tunnel, which
I owe this observation to I think it's a 2-month book club podcast where they did the tunnel, and one of the co-hosts pointed out that they opened Today I Began to Dig. It sounds like Trump, where he's like, I am enormously excited, enormously. Today I began to dig, took my first bite of the earth, put in my first pick. Like, and ever since I heard that, I can't help but like hear him, in like Trump voice. And then again, he starts sounding like Kohler, but he's like very like excited because he's actually digging. Now, one thing that I want to talk about before I give the summary of this section, John, do you think he's actually digging? Now, I have this question will be answered later, but this time around, I'm noticing that like when he starts digging, if the metaphor is uncovering his past traumas, we could say, or like understanding every time he feels like he's been wronged in the past, it makes sense that he's like uncovering this dirt like in this section. And like I find it like now I'm like, I don't know if he's actually digging or not. This gets answered eventually, but there's a place where this feels weirdly like okay, yeah, he's digging. He starts talking about how he does it. He has like a handkerchief in front of his face, but like it gets weirdly sometimes like not amorphous, but like hard to pin down like exactly what's happening, even though he is like digging, he says. So
yeah, that's an interesting question, because there is a level, I agree with you, where like the digging seems kind of almost like, this is like quite the right way to put it, like magical realist almost.
Yeah,
where it's kind of like it does feel like it's kind of taking place in its own like little sphere within the text. And but there's also kind of a lot of reference to his attempts to kind of hide what he's doing to other people. You know, he's particularly his wife, you know, he's talking about how he's, you know, he has to take the loose earth up like a little bit at a time so that she doesn't realize he's digging like a tunnel like in their basement. Talks about how she like spotted like a smear of dirt on his trousers and he had to like panically try to like hide what that was. I mean, I suppose that could be, you know, a veiled reference to something else, knowing Kohler probably come in some way. But at the same time, I don't know. I want to believe. I want to believe he's digging. It's more interesting if he's digging.
Yeah, one of my favorite parts of the that bit where, speaking of him and his penis, Martha keeps asking, what is he doing down there? And he says, I'm overcoming certain Protestant pressures from my past by wailing away on my weenie. And then he goes, oh, Co, cut it out. Yeah, but yeah, Protestant pressures from my past by wailing away on my weenie is like, it's like, that's like a perfect gas sentence in my mind, because it's like incredibly juvenile. So okay, so let's start. I got my summary for Today I Began to Dig, which in this chapter Kohler finally begins to dig, starting behind the furnace. The image of the furnace as blasting hot air into the house doubles as the organizing metaphor for this chapter's theme on quarrels. The domestic quarrel is the model for the historical or international quarrel. History is described as a series of quarrels. We are treated to a Kohler classroom lecture on the subject, as well as several scenes of quarreling with Martha. Culp and his limerick history of the world is introduced. Kohler also remembers two particularly harrowing fights between his mother and his father, and this chapter climaxes in a tirade from Kohler, which is directed at Herschel, his like nice coworker, with the premise being that quarrels conceal. As he says to Herschel, we gild ourselves with this other guilt so we may seem innocent of some deeper, darker, dearer crime, a crime we shall constantly repeat because it defines us, is what we are. Now, we don't have to answer these questions, but I wrote, as I was thinking about it, what is Kohler concealing? What is his crime? And then what is the abyss at the center of this chapter, which we don't have to get to right now? Herschel, along with Martha and a flashback involving Lou breaking up with him, levels another critique at Kohler. Not only does he shape his sentences, which falsifies feeling, not only does he have a loathsome mind, which is what Lou tells him, he also doesn't believe in anything. According to Herschel, he is a sophist or all wind. So I tried to this is one of the chapters where I felt like it was clearly organized around the image of the furnace. But yeah, where do you want to start? Anything you wanted to add to that summary for Today I Began to Dig?
I mean, we didn't mention Culp.
I mentioned him very quickly, but he is very prominent in this chapter. So yeah,
we get so many dirty limericks.
What do you think about the limericks, John? Because if people don't like this book, they often say, I've had enough with the limericks. Is when you read it, they're like, I don't like them. I don't want to read them. I'm tired of them. But.
There's a way in which it appeals to the worst angels of my own sense of humor.
Yeah.
For better or worse, I am someone who is known to occasionally run a joke into the ground, a plane into the Twin Towers. Just because I find it amusing, and I'm not particularly concerned if anyone else finds it amusing. It's a terrible habit I picked up from my dear father.
Just can't let a joke breathe. Yeah. So
there's a way in which the dirty limericks to me, I think you could tell Gass is having tremendous fun composing these, and B, there's this way in which it gets so grating that then it kind of loops around and becomes funny again, because you are imagining this bizarre man who just is laboring over dirty limericks the way that Kohler thinks of himself as laboring over his stupid book about Germany. Culp is working on an entire history of the world in limerick fashion. So his project to do history. One of the ones about Hannibal. Over the Alps on an elephant went Hannibal out of his element. For the elephant's motion was so like the ocean, he continually punicked upon his best tunics, and his slaves had to wash off the elephant. You can just imagine your coworker coming up to you and just jabbering these at you, and you're just please, I'm trying to work. Leave me alone, please. So yeah, it was big coworker hours energy. Also the fact that Culp is a weird white guy who's a weeaboo for Native Americans.
Yes, and he's
fascinating.
He runs a Boy Scout troop.
Which again is exactly the type of weird peccadillo that you pick up about a coworker that feels way too personal. You don't feel like you should know this about this person, but they kind of thrust it upon you. as like, oh yeah, this is what I do with my weekends, and you're just kind of like, just kind of hold it like, you know, the last slice of fruitcake, and it's like, oh, I didn't really want this. Can we
Yeah.
return to being alienated, please?
Well, and like I think I want to hopefully we can circle back, because the Native American theme is an interesting one that later in this book it gets directly paralleled with the plight of the Jewish people, and it's not like brought up in this section so much as just as Culp being really into them, but like Culp
I think there's also
yeah.
the fact that Kohler clearly has so much contempt for Culp's idolization
Yes,
of
yeah,
these people, and clearly thinks that like Culp is wasting his something in himself by like idolizing Native Americans instead of idolizing Germans.
yes, yeah. Who, yeah, for Kohler is the better option. So
Yeah. Meanwhile, like again, these are both like kind of rootless, like American men who are kind of fetishizing another culture to like fill some void in themselves. It's just like because of like generation and presumably some stuff in their backgrounds, like they've chosen very different like fetish objects.
yeah, and like historical fetish objects too.
And it's also really interesting, Ben, do you know that like Germans like historically are kind of obsessed with Native Americans?
No, I don't.
There's like a whole subculture like to this day in Germany of people who like do Native American LARPs.
Huh? I didn't know that.
Yeah. And I think this even goes back to like the 30s, like when kind of like they were getting like Western stories imported from the States.
Wow.
And it's kind of, yeah, it's kind of this very hippie-ish thing of like, oh, being more in touch with nature.
Yeah, yeah.
And there is this really strange thing because again, like Germans, I mean, obviously there were German immigrants who came over to the United States and did terrible things to Native Americans, but like Germany writ large did not. And
Right,
so there's kind of this interesting thing where feels like they think they can get away with it.
Yeah, and well, and that's kind of an interesting parallel with the, as we'll get into later, Mad Meg pointing out how obsessed Germans are with the ancient Greeks, and the idea of like, according to Mad Meg, like the ancient Greeks formed the bedrock of the German mind, according to Mad Meg, versus this kind of like fetish fixation on like an other culture or something. So
yeah, I mean, Mad Meg, it seems to me, and I know we're getting maybe a little ahead, but very much a product of kind of the German Enlightenment and sort of, this fetishization of like Greek and, again, like the Germans, like, again, kind of in this weird thing where they had this inferiority complex to like the English and the French. And I think that even gets brought up later in this section as well, kind of decided like, well, those guys like the classics, we're going to become the best classicists. And that's how we got Nietzsche. And so it was kind of worth it, I guess.
Was it? yeah, it's the real question. Although I think that's
we
a
got
good
other good stuff. I don't know, we got Schiller, we got
Goethe, yeah. So,
but there is something here in terms of like, again, everyone wants to be something they're not.
Yes,
like everybody, no one's actually happy like in their own skin, in their own culture. Everyone has this imagining of like a more ideal way of life that they could, if they could only assume it, if only they'd been born somewhere else, been born differently, they would be who they're meant to be. They'd be fulfilling their destiny in some way.
Just the right chapter. We have not lived the right kind of life. So
exactly.
I want to go back on Culp just a second because
absolutely,
I like this line about Culp. Culp's conversation was designed to make everything appear to be stupid. Callow scarcely whelped. His language was so gee-whizzily imprecise, so stuffed to the nut with the nonce. It was no more particular than wind. Spoke breezily to everyone like a politician at a rally. And I like that sentence because I feel like it connects like this thing the book does where it'll have like a high-minded ideal and then just immediately undercut it with like a bunch of limericks about having sex with nuns, or like having Culp come in. Like there's a bit where like Kohler is trying to do his quarrel lecture, and Culp just yells at him from outside, "Play brawl," and then just like walks away. And you're like, wow, this guy is ruining my great lecture. But there's also a connection there between like the way politicians speak and like how they get the masses riled up with not like great lofty shaped sentences as Kohler gets accused of, but like cliches. And as he says about Culp, like Culp is a man of the cloth, like a man of cliche. So like I don't know, I find this like interesting. Like this bit with puns is interesting because like you could say, well, Gass is like a decayed modernist. All the modernists love punning, but like I think there's something there in terms of like low language being very close to like political language, as well as like the way the book flips between the two. And so I think Culp's an interesting character as being like, like a mirror of Kohler, also like an annoying coworker, but then even like the way he speaks is like part of the book. So
yeah, but I think there's also something really interesting here because like I don't know, maybe I'm pro Culp in a way, but part of it is clearly like Kohler dislikes this guy because he is charismatic and fun
and kind of like debonair too.
Doesn't take himself too seriously. Whereas Kohler has, seemingly spent his life again, kind of making himself miserable by both kind of trying to meet these like very high-minded ideals of like being an academic, while also like trying to meet some kind of like standard of like American family man. Yes. And he resents that. And he resents the fact that Culp clearly is able to, he's like a more integrated person, even if he's kind of stupid too.
And I think part of it is, as we've talked about, like, I think Gass is using Kohler to kind of vent some elitism, which, as we talked about in this pod, I think is justified in some cases. But like, I think part of it is that, Culp speaks in cliches so much, and Gass is like, or Kohler is like, well, I shape my sentences, but he gets accused of Martha of being insincere. Because if you're like spending time there, like trying to say something really good, according to Martha in the book, you don't actually mean it. And Culp clearly means it, at least as far as you can say. Like, I think he does mean what he says, even if he is just saying, like, just really dumb stuff about, but no, he's saying play brawl. So which is just such a dumb pun, but like it's like perfect. So like, I don't know. I think that's like you pointed out. I think Culp does mean what he says, where Kohler's often accused of not meaning what he says. So
because Kohler is clearly, again, barely concealing his resentment and like misanthropy and hatred for like every it's the classic like 60s cartoon, the cool guy walking down the street and the resentful bitter nerd hands in his pockets being like, I hate every man I see.
I fucking hate that guy. And Culp's like probably wearing like dark shades and just like thinking about like like puns or whatever, just strolling down the street.
He's probably fit from being like a scout guy. He likes his kids seemingly.
That's actually a good point, because Kohler hates his kids. So
and we'll see a lot of that in this section.
So I wanted to I think this is a good moment to talk about, what did you think about his quarrel lecture and like the way it sort of has like subheadings. There's this bit about the abyss. And then there's a bit where he's like just like oogling women that are sitting in his class like while he's lecturing. Like it's quite an interesting scene, because I think it's then paralleled with the reflections about the chalkboard in the last chapter we're talking about today, where it's like, oh, now like things are going well, but in this moment he's like trying to lecture, he keeps like looking at like women's legs, and then like he keeps like thinking about other stuff while he's like trying to lecture. So
I mean, it's interesting. It's a really interesting section of the book. I mean, I think that as I again get deeper into this text, the more it feels like the quarrel is this really fruitful, I don't quite know if I want to say metaphor exactly, but this really potent theme, because like to me what this book feels like it's about conflict, external and internal. The conflict like within ourselves, and like how that expresses itself then like out into the world. Like I said, Kohler is someone who clearly like deals with a lot of psychic pain because his like high-minded idea of himself and his like actual circumstances do not match.
Yes.
And he's spent, again, like from what we can tell, 30 to 40 years just stewing in how much he cannot deal with this, like, this dichotomy. And it has turned him into a freak, into a horrible, miserable freak. And even, again, with this lecture, there's this thing where he can't, like, again, I think it comes out most obviously with his constant sexual eruptions.
Yeah.
Where, he is both like, again, he has this very serious idea of himself. Like he is, again, this serious historian. He's a historian of, what might be the most serious matter in like world history. And he's, has written this book that should change the world, even though it probably won't. And, even in this section, we get, again, these fantasies he has of like basically refounding the Nazi party.
I want to get to that because when that happens,
slightly different auspices.
Yeah, when that happens, it's kind of incredible because that happens in the Mad Meg section technically, but like he's working up to that. Yeah, so yeah.
And then and then he gets horny, and then it's like he turns into just this nasty little boy.
Yeah.
And so like he cannot actually collate like the contents of his mind. He can't develop like a stable image of himself. And so, when there's any conflict, he can't just like see a hot lady and be like, there's a hot lady.
Yeah.
And then like move on. Like it has to become this like psychic thorn that like he cannot help but like yank out in like the most grotesque way possible.
Yeah, I think the inability to collate the contents of his mind, I think, is like the theme of this book, because like when he's like talking about the quarrel, you're suddenly just like airdropped into a unattributed dialogue, like one of the worst like interrelationship fights where like there's just everyone's just constantly nagging at each other in like these tiny little ways. And since this is a modernist novel, no unattributed dialogue. You don't even get the cool little modernist line break with the dash when somebody's talking. It's just like a block paragraph. And I find that stuff to be kind of awe-inspiring because like, I know it can be difficult, and I know people talk about how hard it is, but I feel like it feels like you're in the fight without any grounding. And I think that's like why Gass does what he does. But to me, it like gets you almost closer to what's going on than if you were protected by like, and then Martha said, or like, Martha dug in her nails, like quote, like you always do this. Instead, you're just like there. And I think that also has to do with like you were saying, like he's unable to, when he's presumably writing this down, he's unable to like break this part off and put it elsewhere. Like it has to be there. So
yeah, like this is like free associative in a way. Like he can't like, and again, like this is in some ways like it feels very like real, very familiar. Like I know, I'm sure this has happened to you, but it's definitely happened to me. You're trying to write something, you're trying to maybe do something academic or creative, but all you can think about is, this fight you got into with like someone in your family or significant other. And it's just like hounding you. And like, you can't even like really express it into like, it's not even like creatively productive. It's just distracting.
Yeah.
And maybe just writing it down is the best way to handle it. I don't know. But it feels very real in terms of just like Kohler is clearly like stewing on this actively as he's writing.
Yeah, and presumably like when he's lecturing, although like I think that part gets a little clearer to me later in the sections that we read. But like I think he's like trying to like, there's also a bit that I can't find, but do you remember when he like is like, he's like, oh, that student looks really hot, and then he looks at her name, and her name is like this sort of like this name that's no one has ever said before, and he just internally goes, what kind of name is this? Like, and he's supposed to be like, again, he's supposed to be lecturing, he's oogling one of his students, which is gross, and then he just can't like resist this like patrician like reaction to her name just being like, like an unplaced unpronounceable name, basically. Like it's just such a great, there are parts where this book like resembles like Confederacy of Dunces, Ignatius J. Riley, but like evil, like all like the nationalistic, sentiment, but like just the kind of like outrage at somebody having like a weird name, so but yeah, so I want to say one thing about the Abyss, and then maybe we can move on to the next section. So the Abyss section stuck out a lot to me. So when he's lecturing, there's another thing that he's doing that we haven't even talked about, where he imagines the abyss of hell. And it's like there are safes falling from the sky and like killing a giant like flesh mound of people. And I think we're meant to think of this as like Kohler realizing that like, even though like World War II is over, even though he's maybe sympathetic to the Nazi cause, the Holocaust did happen. And you can't reckon with the Holocaust happening in modernity. And I think like when you think about this quarrel section, there's an emphasis on like, why are these quarrels concealing everything? Why is Kohler having such a hard time collating the contents of his mind? And I think, as we've talked about, he's not well adjusted. He doesn't have a stable self-image. But I think Gasser is even gesturing like the Holocaust did happen, and it changed like man's relationship to man and technology forever. And I think like that doesn't get explicitly named. And I think Kohler, because he's weird, won't say that. But there's this like gnawing emptiness that gets expressed with the image of the hell that is like underneath all of this quarreling. And like that part like really just blew me away this time, because like I don't remember what I thought like before, like oh, he's like thinking about death or whatever, but like I think the fact that it's here in this section is like the underneath thing. And that's why Kohler, like when Herschel says like, what are you talking about? Like, you're saying nonsense. It's like, yeah, like his inability to deal with like what has happened in history, basically. So
yeah, well, I mean, maybe this is a little trite, but I'm just kind of associating to, again, he's digging the tunnel. Yeah. Which is, perhaps you could say both kind of a tomb, but also like a means of egress, a means of escape. Yeah. And where does he start? The furnace. Right. Yeah. The oven. I'm not going to like try to put too fine a point on it, but I think you get what I'm saying.
Well, yeah, and again, he doesn't say this explicitly, but yeah, it's like it's all there. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and again, there is no poetry after Auschwitz.
Yeah. Oh, just like and like the idea too that, as Adorno says in that, like to move past that as some forms of means of representation, it's like it has to almost work with gaps and lacuna. And I think that's another reason how this book works is like not saying everything explicitly. It like you said, no poetry after Auschwitz. It's like, yeah, you can't really speak directly of these things in this way anymore. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, because to speak directly is to confront the horror, which Kohler, for personal reasons, cannot do. Again, because he can't address his own guilt and his own, complicity, and the fact that he, at some level, still, has this fetishistic attachment to Germany at this particular time that he's so hung up on.
Well, and then later in chapter 6, the Windows one, he argues like the Holocaust was like the only pure thought or something, which is quite like is one of the more repellent things I think in this book, frankly. And like that's why he's so attracted to it. It's like he's saying it's like one of the pure forms, which is
it's the only true thing that ever happened.
Yeah, which is like, quite ugly and grotesque. And like again, he can't confront it. He has to like say it that way. So yeah.
No, I mean, there's a way in which, again, this self-serious aspect he has it's another form of defense. It's another way of denying like his complicity in these things, because he's a serious historian now, and the work he's doing is important. And so he can't be held accountable for these things he did, or these things he thought.
It's all just words, man. Yeah. So.
Yeah. But again, but it all gets repressed. It all gets buried, and it all like starts erupting, out of the basement. Yeah. So to speak.
Yeah. Yeah, see, like you could imagine like a kind of tacky horror movie version of this where like he goes down to the basement and then just like sees hell. But like instead it's like I'm in front of the classroom, I'm trying to do something, I'm oogling a woman, I'm thinking about how her name is dumb, and then suddenly like I see like a frightening vision basically like as I'm doing all that. But yeah, so That's kind of what I wanted to touch on. I mean, I'm sure we could talk more about this section. I think like a lot of the stuff starts clicking in this one. Anything you wanted to talk about from Today I Began to Dig? Anything else that you wanted to bring up?
Nothing that I don't think we can kind of address as we go through the other sections.
Yeah, as a way to transition, one of my favorite parts is the end of this section. He goes, "I'm normal." So he's like, "I'm a normal guy. Lou broke up with me because I'm too normal, not because I have a loathsome mind." So, so let's talk about Mad Meg, which I have a little summary. Where's my Mad Meg summary? Oh yeah, Kohler. So this is Mad Meg chapter 5. Kohler remembers Mad Meg, his former teacher, mentor, and possibly paramour. Mad Meg, in a series of interrupted speeches delivered through Meg's commanding oration, gives a very postmodern view of history. Whoever shouts the loudest and with the most feeling creates reality and can force others to accept his worldview. Reality is created by the most eloquent observer. The study of history, rather than being quarrels, is revealed to be a study of language. The memories of Mad Meg lead Kohler to create the Party of Disappointed People, which is like his version of the Nazi Party. With Mad Meg as the spiritual founder. Kohler also remembers the Sunday drives his father would subject the family and how those to, and how those drives influenced his own family's Sunday drives. There's an extended pastoral reverie about decaying and decrepit barns that Kohler finds on one of these drives, which I hope we talk about because this is the most mysterious section to me, is when he's like, "Today I will become barns." So the chapter climaxes in Meg's greatest speech delivered at the behest of German nationalist leaders, as well as Meg's death, which Kohler may or may not be present for. I wanted to get your feelings on that because there's a weird instability that happens at Meg's death where I wonder if Kohler was actually there. What did you think of the Mad Meg section? Because as you mentioned in the opening, I feel like the use of typeface is a really cool way to get at what a commanding speaker Mad Meg was. Because like when he shouts, like the text will be huge and in bold and like other things like that. So,
yeah, I mean, I feel like I talked about this a little bit in our first episode. Meg, again, feels for me like this really, frankly, like powerful condemnation of like the academic humanist project.
Yeah, I know, right? Yeah.
You know,
but he's so persuasive, John. Don't you just believe him? He's so persuasive.
Again, that's the problem, Ben. That's the problem when you make the weaker argument the stronger.
Yeah. Mad Meg is just like the demiurge sophist. Yeah, just like the world's most powerful sophist. Yeah, so
yeah, we're here in his thinkatorium, and he's making the ideas bad. What I was going to say was like, he's clearly incredibly charismatic, a great speaker. Seems to know his stuff. He is not just like it's not just hot air, like, but he, for reasons that again maybe we can puzzle out here, I don't know if the text gives us quite enough to know for sure, has thrown his lot in with evil. And all the humanism in the world like does not like change that, like all his learning, all his Greek and Latin, like, does not move him away from participating in this horror show.
Yeah.
And that's true of a lot of people in and outside of the academy.
Well, there's the Zizek line about academics dusting the balls of people in power. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but I think there's still like, it's very comforting to believe that like, oh, people who care about art and literature and these things, again, I feel like we've talked about this before, maybe even on the show. I think there is sometimes like kind of a lefty cope line where it's like, oh, like right wingers can't make good art. Like they're all like charlatans. And it's like, well, most right wingers make bad art, but also so do most left wingers. Like, most people make bad art. Most people aren't good artists. Borges was right wing, and we love Borges here.
Yeah.
Knowing a lot about like the classics and caring about art and literature and philosophy and learning, like, I don't want to say that they can't change your opinion on the world, but they also, I can't guarantee they're ever going to change your view for the better.
Right.
Especially, again, if you're being taught by someone like Mad Meg.
I also wanted to point out, John, I think you did a good job of pointing out that Mad Meg's gender ambiguity is important here, because there's a part where Kohler says Mad Meg probably thought himself a witch. It's like what Kohler says. And so like there's an interesting, like Mad Meg is interesting because I think you're totally right that he's like this humanism won't necessarily make you a moral person, and especially if you're a sophist of the kind of caliber that Mad Meg is. Because one thing that I find interesting, I think a valid criticism of this book is that it doesn't really have anything to say about like actual the field of history. Like there's no like this historian, that historian. It's more like Gass is like, well, I know philosophy and language, and I think what's history is really about is the person speaking. And so he makes like this guy saying it like the observer. So like if you're a persuasive observer and it's your mind observing, you can make other people believe whatever you want. And I think like that's like kind of one version of like the power of words, maybe. But I think like from Mad Meg's point of view, it's almost like implied that he just doesn't have a life. Like that part where like Kohler's like, I never saw him do anything normal. like again, he's just like this weird gremlin basically that like subjects everyone to his like his magical speeches basically, even though he has like no real life. And I find to me the implication of like, so he was modeled on Treatska, who I did a little research on, and Treatska was like just one of the most racist German academics. But the funny thing about Treatska is he was deaf, and so instead of being an eloquent speaker, he just shouted. But since like that was still commanding to people still showed up to see him. So Gass is like, well, he actually needs to speak well if I'm gonna do my version of this, not just like a guy who just shouts racist things, basically. But
you can't really like do that in text.
Yeah, but like
you gotta have to add a little extra in there to have the same effect if you're reading it. But I mean, the Germans love getting yelled at,
and so does Kohler, I guess. Yeah,
I guess so.
But yeah, like I think to your point about the humanism not like maybe giving you everything is like, again, all his life is. And I think he does believe certain like racist things about the superiority of the races. Mad Meg does. And I think that comes out in just his like sophist like application of that. So.
And I think there's an interesting, again, kind of thing going on here with Kohler, like what's true and what's false in like Kohler's perception.
Yes.
Because Kohler says he never saw Mad Meg do anything normal. His portrayal of this man is, again, like you said, this weird, Nazi Renaissance man gremlin. But is it true?
Right. Yeah.
Because again, Meg definitely occupies a place where Kohler is kind of his like ideal self in a way. This is the type of person Kohler like wishes he could be.
Yeah, definitely.
If he had like the oratorial skill, or he didn't have like his family weighing him down.
Yes.
But there's also a way in which like Meg's closed offness or the constraints of his life mean that like the thing Kohler finds humiliating about his own life, his relationship with his family, his sexual desires, his like lack of luck with the opposite sex. These are all things that he can kind of shunt out of his image of Mad Meg. And he doesn't have to think about like, what was this guy's relationship with his father like? Oh, is he single because he's just so devoted to history? Or is it because every woman who meets him finds him noxious? Or because he's gay?
Or it's because he's a misogynist also. Because like Mad Meg says some very misogynist things at several points in this chapter. So yeah.
Yeah. Or again, is he a little light in the loafers?
Well, I'm glad you brought that up because that's where that sexual cartoon comes into play, which maybe we can talk about that now. But
yeah, so Kohler goes on like kind of an extended reverie. He has like a Der Stürmer cartoon of like a giant like Nazi fist jerking off a circumcised and therefore obviously Jewish penis.
Yes.
And that appears to be kind of the whole thing.
And it happens like right after there's a memory of Mad Meg saying, I love ideas. I want to put them in my mouth. And then he grabs Kohler. And then it just is like, I have one of my favorite cartoons. And then he just describes that. And I think, again, like we've been saying, what is the perception of Mad Meg? What is real? Like, did they have some sort of sexual relationship at some point? I don't know. But one thing I noticed after that scene occurs is that when Mad Meg is giving his finally like magnificent speech that ends the chapter, Kohler is incredibly uncomfortable the whole time. Did you pick up on that? Like, he's like, yes. I wanted the beer to come down and drown us. Like, I wanted to leave. Like, I don't want to be here anymore. And then like he does the magnificent speech, and then like then it kind of like that's the high point of the chapter, and then it's like Mad Meg's death scene, basically.
Yeah. Then I have a question.
Yes.
Kohler obviously talks a lot about his penis.
Right.
Small it is, how droopy it is, how he can barely see it over his big fat belly. Has he mentioned, is he circumcised?
Well, so that gets answered in particularly grueling fashion at one of the emotional climaxes of this book, which I don't want to spoil, but you might be able to guess. So,
well, I was going to say, I mean, that is something that feels kind of relevant here again, especially over Kohler's like self-loathing and like feeling of being un-German. I mean, again, America is like one of the only countries in the world that circumcises like the majority of men for non-religious reasons and has been doing it for like over a century at this point.
Right. Yeah.
So yeah.
Seems relevant here. I don't want to spoil when that gets revealed, because that's like one of the things Gass said about this book is that he's regressing into the past, and that moment about his penis is like way at the end. So yeah, you can kind of guess where that's going, but
yeah, I think it's interesting that it has not been like explicitly addressed up till now, despite again how much he talks about his penis. It's a pretty big thing about how a penis looks.
I said this before, but it's so funny in the 80s. Gass is like, I really like this tunnel as an organizing metaphor. And there's all these obvious things about the penis which aren't very interesting. And I read that, I'm like, you clearly thought they were interesting like later. like at some point you're like, actually, it's cool how much this resembles a penis, and I'm gonna have my narrator talk about it a lot. Like, but in the interview, he's just like, I don't. That's too obvious. I'm better than that. But yeah.
And then I want to talk a bit about the Mad Meg's death scene, because I know you were curious about whether or not Kohler has actually been there, unless you have more you want to say about...
Well, the last thing I want to say about Meg's relationship is, one thing I noticed is he does highlight the original term of the pedagogical relationship in ancient Greece. And I think, like, given that Mad Meg talks about that, there's a suggestion of some sexual relationship between the two. I think it's not far to say that this might have happened. And I think again, if it did happen, it's interesting that Kohler is so actively repressing this that he doesn't want to talk about it. But if it didn't happen, the suggestion is still there, which I think is interesting. So,
yeah. And I think that this gets more interesting when we think about the death scene.
Yes. Yeah.
And specifically, it's interesting. This is an idea that just kind of really started spinning in my head here in like the last 50 minutes. It's really interesting. Friend of the show, our friend Jess in our like friends group chat posted a photo yesterday because she saw a painting of a famous image from the Phaedo in a museum, and it's Socrates, reclining and like pointing at the sky, surrounded by all his friends as he's about to drink the hemlock.
Yeah, and
I think that has become kind of like a keystone for me here, because I'm thinking again, you mentioned how there is a lot of reference to, they reference the original root, of pederast as kind of where pedagogy comes from, or at least, a similar word. I don't know if pederast is exactly, what I'm saying.
Yeah, like pedagogue or something. Yeah.
Yeah. But like what I'm getting at here, we also have a lot of references throughout to other characters from Greek kind of Athenian classical literature, Xenophon, Alcibiades. I don't actually know if we get a reference to Plato directly.
Actually, but Mad Meg calls Kohler Alcibiades, and he goes,
Yes.
"You mean you're not German?" like he really is like surprised that Kohler's not German, but he's a beautiful, he's a handsome.
It's like Alcibiades in Sparta,
Yeah.
Spartaning the Spartans.
Yeah.
But I think that Kohler might kind of be trying to present himself more as Plato.
Oh, yeah.
Like
I was there. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, no, he wasn't there.
Right.
Plato's not in the dialogue.
Oh, that's true. Yeah.
Yeah. So I feel like and again, maybe this is repression. Maybe this is, him kind of trying to saint Mad Meg in a way that, I think that there's some consensus that Plato is kind of idealizing Socrates in the dialogues.
Well, I mean, he does make Mad Meg the spiritual leader of the People's Disappointed Party.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I think there's something going on here with these classical allusions, and Mad Meg is kind of this spiritual founder who is actually just a mouthpiece for Kohler's own doctrines.
Yeah, which again, as we've said, are whoever shouts the most eloquently and the loudest, it creates reality.
And like there might be actual content of Mad Meg's like lectures in here, but like I think that the implication is that Kohler is choosing what to highlight for us, and he's choosing things that lead to his own conclusions. And I think the sex stuff is still there. It's still interesting. And again, maybe that's why he's repressing, because he needs Mad Meg to be more than just some guy who like molested him.
Or that he had like, just a for some reason, a ancient Greek pedagogical relationship, even though it was German in the 30s. Yeah. So, or before then, maybe like right about that time.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm still developing this, but I'm going to be thinking on it more as we kind of are going through this.
So just a little bit,
eyes out for those Greek names I love so much. Alcibiades.
Well, yeah, I saw that because you pointed it out before, and then I was like, oh, he's like, what a handsome student I have, But on that tip, just a little bit longer, what does it matter? This is Mad Meg speaking of Socrates. What does it matter that he buggered little boys? Wasn't he a vicious instrumentalist, beggar blind to poetry, to paint, to music, sculpture, and the virile mountain gods? That hate for mathematics, too. That hate for science. One of us, wasn't he? True humanist. Ha! So, city a man, he seldom freed his feet to feel the country. Yes, fanatic, lover of men, lover of man. So, you can tell that, like, Mad Meg's being, like, a little weird here. And I like that he mentions that Meg's style is to go from Geist to Scheiss, to go from spirit to shit, because I feel like Kohler does that, like, all the time.
No, it's really like a tick he picked up from Mad Meg.
Yeah, for sure. There's one more thing I have, and then we can maybe move forward because, this is Meg talking about this postmodern view of history. Also, just as a side note, I think it's so funny that, like, of Mad Meg's book titles, the very last one is called The Failure of the Future. And it's like, can you imagine just like a 30s German professor who's a classicist basically doing Mark Fisher from First Principles? Like, he's like, the future is over and it's not the promise we've called for. And I just think it's so funny because that's such a moment of like, it's the 90s in this particular book. So
okay, I don't want to quite move on yet because I think we actually have not talked about another interesting bit from this section.
Well, before we do that, one last thing about Meg, about postmodernism. This is just a quote. It's a war of lie against lie in this world where we are fancy against fantasy, nightmare throttling nightmare, like two wedded anacondas. So again, like a very striking image, but there's no objective reality. It's just this like, battle of representation. So, but what were you going to take us to?
And I think that there's still going to be some pretty fruitful stuff to talk about in relation to, again, kind of these postmodern themes and these themes about history. but we haven't talked about kind of Kohler's reveries on his own history in this section, particularly his relationship with his own father and his own family.
Yeah, there's a section called Sunday Drives, and I owe this to a collection that was published like after the tunnel came out. I'll have to dig up the exact thing, but they pointed out the psychoanalytic pun where he says my father's drives, like my father's like instinctual drives versus like actually driving us all in the car, which I thought was funny. But
yeah, so I mean, what did you think of these sections, Ben? Because I found them interesting because again, there's obviously a lot going on here. There's Kohler's own self-understanding, and I feel like this is again a section where we kind of start seeing, I don't even necessarily know if it's as simple as a dichotomy, but again, we kind of see these different parts of Kohler kind of in conflict with one another.
Yeah.
And again, his inability to square like where he came from with where he is and where he was.
Yeah, and like when he's trying to talk about, well, so that Sunday Drive starts by talking about the drives that he took with his family and Martha. And then they like regress to his father's drives. And the way his father's drives work is he like never wanted to do them. And so his father would kind of domineer and put everyone in the car. And then they would drive very slowly through the countryside. And the only thing that Kohler really looked forward to in these was getting ice cream afterwards. And there's a great scene where like he gets his favorite ice cream flavor, and then his father just starts verbally abusing him for picking that flavor. And again, it's not like
which
attributed.
Is rainbow.
Yeah, which is Yeah. That's interesting. So very interesting. So actually, I want to read that because, again, it's another bit where it's not attributed. So I loved, this is speaking of the rainbow flavor, I loved its accidental and chaotic benevolence. It was like having a noise melt in your mouth. Grape eased into pineapple, then bent itself about banana. A nut would turn up. You're licking leftovers. Rainbow was a letdown only when the scoop took up too much of the same flavor. What is a rainbow of one color? It's mostly grape, alas, alack, it's all lemon. Later, I would have compared rainbow to the stock pot at the back of the stove. I could have extolled leftovers, stews, and hashes, but the youthful mind is a barren plain. There's no range of reference. Crows eat what nobody wants. I like rainbow. Crows go for what's run over on the road. And so it's like, who's speaking there? It's very clearly his dad just berating him for picking the rainbow flavor. And I find that also stuck out because, again, not attributed. Again, that's almost like Kohler's like inner brain, like having interiorized this abuse, like speaking
like intrusive
at him.
Thoughts.
Yeah, exactly. Like his intrusive thoughts. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's intense. Like it is not a fun section.
Yeah. Well, and then there's a crash too. Yeah. So also one of the things that stuck out to me the most in this book is there's a bit where he's driving, like, and he's remembering his father's drives, and he's like, what if I just ran the car off the road? like it's just like this like intrusive thought, which like, again, is like weirdly stimulating, but it comes again, like in the middle of a paragraph. It's just like, I could just drive off into the road. Like, again, like an intrusive thought, but yeah.
Yeah. I mean, this is, again, like one of the few moments where I really found myself like feeling deeply for Kohler.
Yeah.
Because like it is this moment where you can tell like this is one of the things that like set him on, again, maybe not this exact moment, but like this is like the start or like an instance in like a pattern that like has made him what he is. Like the thing that he loves being berated to him, and kind of, these drives towards purity and away from, admixture and complexity.
Yeah. Everything coming together. Yeah.
Yeah. This praising of flatness and of singularity, that I think, we see echoing. And again, kind of the shaming of desire, the shaming of enjoyment, of fun, Like what are Culp's limericks but the rainbow ice cream of language?
Yeah, instead he's like remembering his father being like, yeah, Crow would say that, like, get out of here. Also, we haven't said that they're going on drives because it's the Depression and they need to steal like food from people's farms. Like there's one thing I should brought up because I think that's also relevant here because like they're one, it's the Depression, so like fun is probably not at a perimeter or a premium here. But then two, it's like, yeah, like we have to go like steal things from people's farms, which like Kohler's like, it's weird that we're doing this and the parents are saying that we should do this. Like as a kid, he's like, I'm a little weirded out that we're like just taking food from somebody's farm because it's the Depression, basically. But yeah.
Yeah. And then, again, like there's this way in which, like, again, Kohler clearly feels like smothered by family life.
Yeah.
Like he clearly at some level, like, I don't want to entirely say like, oh, he does want to be a parent. I mean, he doesn't, but I don't want to like be like, oh, because he like that's not his true self or something. But like, he's never had a positive role model. His father, who seems just like a miserable bastard, Mad Meg, who is, potentially like molested him. Right. And then Uncle Balt, who is basically just like a self-invented like cartoon character of masculinity, who's really probably just his dad and Mad Meg, like kind of blended up.
I also love that there's a throwaway where he's like trying to talk about Uncle Balt to Martha, and Martha's like, "Who are you talking about?" like he's like, yeah.
He must seem like a maniac. Like and again, he references that he like has like Uncle Balt's like hunting license or something. Like he has like some piece of documentation of this man.
Yeah,
and I'm kind of like, is this just a thing he wrote on? Like
Uncle Balt. Yeah, he just like wrote his name on the thing. Yeah.
Like it's unclear. And again, I guess maybe there's a slight implication that again, maybe Uncle Balt, there is a real Uncle Balt, but Uncle Balt is not the Uncle Balt in the text.
Yeah.
There might be a mother's brother named Balt, but he's not this, Superman of Dust Bowl masculinity or something like that.
Yeah, tall, strong, and self-contained. Yeah. So yeah.
But he is an idea fix. He is this image that Kohler is invested so much in. And again, Kohler is someone who has like chosen a life that makes him miserable.
Yeah.
Like whether that's because of repressed guilt, whether that's because of never like finding another way to be. I don't know for sure. I don't know if that's quite what the book is even asking us to consider. But there's a level in which like I can feel for him. He clearly feels trapped. He's digging this tunnel to escape from his own life.
Yeah, and from him, I think too. Like
and from himself. Yeah. I mean, there's the way in which like he's trying to bury himself alive so that he no longer has to deal with like the pain of his own existence and how miserable he is and how much he hates his wife and his kids and his job and his colleagues and the world.
Yeah, I also
and he hates it for being like a miserable, ugly place.
Well,
and you know what?
Yeah. He's
a miserable bastard, but he has a point in that regard. Things could be a lot better, as Calvin said.
Yeah, things a better world is possible. One of the things that he says that Mad Meg says on this line that you're saying, John, is how I hate this life. I don't want to leave. And so like the idea that you're hating everything like you're saying, but also like you can't leave it and you're almost enjoying how much you hate it. There's a kind of like a hate, like enjoyment in the hatred that I think sometimes you see, but then other times it's like you were saying, like in the sort of thinking about the family drive, he's like thinking about how his father kind of like bullied him, and then he starts bullying his kid. Like he's like enjoying his kid gets like depressed when they're going on the Sunday drives, even though there's a bit where he's like, I tried to be spontaneous about it, so it's not like I'm saying like, oh, we have to do it, but then he gets clear out enjoyment out of his kid just like slowly like stops being excited and they're just like driving, so like yeah.
Yeah, you know, it again, I guess I'm again kind of finding myself coming back to that theme we talked about in our last episode, the fascism of the heart. And maybe this is a good way to get into the disappointed people's party. Um, you know, I know we talked about this in that first episode. You know, like there is a way in which, like, again, when I find myself sympathizing with Kohler, it's when he is just describing the very real, like, bits of ugliness and misery that characterize like a lot of human life. You know,
yeah.
And again, sometimes he's doing that in a way where he is clearly like taking it out on another person, but there are also times where he's clear, like, again, his dad bullied him for liking a flavor of ice cream.
Right.
Like, that sucks.
Yeah.
That sucks so fucking bad.
Also, like, you're forced to go on this drive too. Like, you don't even want to go.
That too. Yeah. Or again, you know, like, the fact that like him and his wife clearly loathe each other and like cannot get out of this relationship. Like, they're both like, he's obviously bears some amount of responsibility there, but it sucks. Like, it's not like this, like, there's a way in which, like, again, this book is, I think, kind of reflecting on the way that like post-war prosperity in the particular like mode it was lived out in like the academy was a trap. Like, it was a trap. It got people stuck, and it made people miserable in this way that, again, feels a little surreal to read about now because things feel even more desperate and precarious. But it's like, you know, I find myself sympathetic with him in these moments. But then, you know, again, as is pointed out time and time again, the true social base of fascism is the petit bourgeois. You know, it is the smallholder. It is the disappointed people. The people who thought they were supposed to get something and didn't get it.
As he says regarding that, what's great too about right before the disappointed people thing is he remembers the arm in the car crash during not the original car crash memory, but the second layer of memory. Like, he's remembering like doing drives with his family, and then he sees the car crash arm of when he saw a car crash when he was a kid. And then he says, I wonder how many men and women, kids and dogs go through life in a state of modest misery, how much communal coldness there is, how much extinguished hope. Perhaps I should form a party for the disappointed people. And then, you know, like, that stews for a while. And then he's like, I am making Meg the spiritual leader of the party of disappointed people. Now, what did you think when you got to all the doodles? Because there's a great bit from like the design of the book about the doodles. But what did you think of the doodles?
So I like that for some reason it starts off with a molecule.
Yeah. The structure, a PDP particle. Yeah.
Like, I don't totally know what to make of that.
My only way to interpret that is that it's all zeros. It's all nothing.
Yeah.
Like, the idea that it's like lack is like what's forming it.
It's also a swastika, I guess.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, that too. Yeah.
It's a swastika, but the little bent parts are zeros instead.
Kohler has a genius for visual design. Yeah.
I mean, there's a way in which like I found myself looking at like his stuff. And have you ever had this experience, Ben, of like you look up like you're like on a Wikipedia page for like a like country you don't know a ton about, and you like look and see, you know, at that kind of like top portion of the Wikipedia page where it says like all the like fast facts about the country.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, the current president is, you know, so-and-so, and he's from, the Party for Kindness and Justice. And then you know, are like, I wonder what that party is about. And then you open it and it's like, the Party for Kindness and Justice is, a ethno-nationalist, far-right, quasi-fascist party that has controlled X country for the last like 50 years. You know, was founded by like a guy who, you know, studied in Germany in the 30s. And
yeah, it's like I click on controversies, yeah, like, or something. Yeah. So I mean, I can totally see that. Yeah. So,
but but like I feel like all those parties also have like a cutesy logo most of the time, where it's like a smiling tree.
Or like some kind of animal, and then you find out like the animal represents like the ethno-nationalist spirit. Yeah. And then you're like, oh, yeah. So.
And that's what the Disappointed People's Party felt like to me. Like, if I went to a country and found out it was run by the Disappointed People's Party, I would be getting out of there as fast as I can.
Yeah, you'd be like, no thanks. Yeah.
But I think there's also an interesting thing here in terms of, again, kind of like, there are all these flags, there are like colors, there are like hats. He's like, oh, do we need like a handshake to go with it? And so there's also this, again, kind of this Europhilia aspect to it, where it's like, oh, like American political parties are stupid. Like, I want to like do the equally stupid thing of like European political parties.
Yeah, well, and like that would bring people together. Like, yeah, like that would do it. Yeah. Well, about the doodles, so this is from Designing the Tunnel, which is a great little bit you can find online of Gass talking about the book design, and he says, the doodle page. Kohler is trying out emblems, flags. It has to seem sketchy, but it must be striking nevertheless. Is the previous page striking or not? Is there something menacing about the page, even though it is not thoroughly understood? If not, the little images have failed. On this page, we are to imagine some of Hitler's little doodles, or the first drawn ideas for the architectural layout of the camps. I want something at once naive, a little charming, and a lot unsettling. And then he says, the last of the uniform and the banner design pages... this is later, not as important, but I think like the bit where he goes like, I want it to be once naive, a little charming, and a lot unsettling. So
yeah, no, I mean, it does a good job. Like, I can see how this, again, in a different person's hands, obviously, but like, you could rally a lot of people in America to the Disappointed People's Party.
Well, and like that's an interesting bit, because if you read some scholarly treatments of this, they talk about how like the people, the Disappointed People's Party would never work as a political party, and it's like, I don't know if we can say that anymore personally. Not
to again get like too topical, but like I actually do think that the Republican Party, as it's currently constituted, is the Disappointed People's Party.
Yes, yeah,
like it's people who have all the like power and wealth, but like not enough of it in their opinion. All the people who are just like resentful, bitter losers who like cannot let go of their resentments, and just are making it literally everyone in the world's problem.
And some of them are like familial and domestic. Like if you look at all of the anti-trans legislation, it's coming out of Ohio. Like Ohio has like nuclear Hitler particles and like, you know, Party of Disappointed People. And it's like probably something happened with those families, like, and people are resenting it. So, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there's a way in which like the current like Iran war debacle is because there are a bunch of like people in DC who are really mad that like they couldn't get another president to invade Iran, like when they thought it was a better idea.
Right.
That like we didn't, you know, take down the Ayatollah like right away.
Or, you know, or at worst, they're believing their own propaganda. And so there's like a way that they have this lack, and then they've created the way to fill it. And it turns out that won't do it either. So, yeah.
So there's something about like the way Kohler fetishizes disappointment as like the core of this party. Because again, like I said earlier, things could be a lot better. Yeah, they really could. Yeah. Disappointment is not necessarily about things being better. It's about you getting what you want.
Yes. Yeah.
Regardless of whether or not like what you want is well considered or good for anyone else. Like, I feel like, you know, yeah, if there's a reason the Party of Disappointed People is going to end up becoming, ethno-nationalist, far-right, quasi-fascist party that is going to run America for, you know, however long. It's because it's not about making things better. It's about, like, getting you what you think you deserve.
Yeah, and at the expense of other people. So, yeah. Yeah, because
that's right-wing politics, I guess.
Well, I mean, he says, like, there's that early on in the book, our proper bliss depends on what we blame. And then the much quoted portion, which is worth reading, is let me find it. This is worth reading because this is the thing that people usually pull out of the book regarding disappointment. Hope, remember, did not fly out of the jar like the rest of the evils, but remained there to tease us, to hold us back from suicide and every other sensible response. And it's true. We would survive, for bad luck alone does not embitter us that badly, nor the simple presence of pleasure spoil the soul when pain also arrives, nor does the feeling that our affairs might have been better managed move us out of range of ordinary disappointment. It is when we recognize that the loss has been caused in great part by others, that it needn't have happened, and that there is an enemy out there who has stolen our loaf, soured our wine, infected our book of splendid verses with filthy rhymes. Then we are filled with resentment, and would hang the villains from that bough we would have lounged in licorous love beneath, had the tree not been cut down by greedy and dim-witted loggers in the pay of the lumber interests. Watch out, then. Watch out for us. Be on your guard. Look sharp both ways. When we learn, we in any numbers, when we find out who is forcing us to give up life in order to survive. It is this condition in men that makes them ideal candidates for the party of the disappointed people. So, crucially, as you were saying, John, blaming other people, like other people did this to us, not other things. So, yeah.
I think there's also a bit a little later where he's like literally fantasizing about hanging Culp.
Yeah.
Like he wants to do the day of the rope to his coworker for doing dirty limericks.
It's also funny that he appears in that bit. Somebody's broken in and wrote all these limericks down. Who could it be? Yeah.
In my sonorous books of prose.
Yeah. There's a great, like, one of the best things about the limericks is, like, there's some review that I need to find where somebody is like, the limericks make the book worse. And it's like, and this is like an actual published review from like a legit newspaper. And it's like, I don't know, there's just something really funny about having that reaction where it's like clearly like meant to be there, so it makes Kohler mad. That's why it's there. So,
yeah, I mean, I also like, there's part of me that thinks like you could tell William Gass, like putting all the limericks in there makes the book worse. And it'd be like, yes.
Good. Yeah.
That means it's working.
See, that's one of the things, just not to derail, but I was trying to tell somebody about the tunnel. And it's like, yeah, the tunnel is an evil, nasty book, but Gass is having so much fun on like almost every page that it's like, I can't even, like, just the fact that you can get it. Like, did you get to the bit where Kohler says, in any proper society, those people who use alliteration should be hung?
Which again, after he was just like whacking my
Protestant penis. Yeah. Oh man. Yeah, so
I think it gets down to the fact that Kohler is clearly suicidal as well.
Yeah, Kohler's suicidal. He has to blame other people. He thinks that everyone else will band together under this cry. And as we've said, like, that does seem to inform a lot of current Republican politics, even if I think, again, it's like incoherent at times. So,
well, no, it's absolutely incoherent. That's the point. Yeah. That's why it's doomed to fail. That's why gas is currently like $1.25 more than it was like 6 months ago for no reason.
Yeah, for Trump remembering that he can start fighting again. I don't even know. Yeah, so
I'm pretty confused at this point about all that stuff. So let's get back to books. Let's get back to something easier to understand. The Tunnel by William Gass.
Yeah. So we talked about the Party of Disappointment. Anything else from Mad Meg, the section on Mad Meg? We kind of edged a little bit into why windows are important to me.
Yeah, I think I'm good to move on to the next one, unless you want to talk at all about like the barricade or like the platyhelminthism.
So those sections are kind of mysterious because when I've been reading it this time, I've been like, I'm going to figure out why all of the insets are in here. And then I got to the barricade and accusations of platyhelminthism, and I said, I don't know why these are in here. like some of them are good, like the barricade where Kohler talks about putting a barricade between him and his family, I think is related to some of the stuff you were talking about. In the army, he talks about being dehumanized when he joined the army. Accusations of platyhelminthism seems to prefigure a lot of the current state of Israel, which we don't have to necessarily get into, but Gass has definitely pointed it out before. I mean, these sections are good, but they feel like they're put in there to kind of break up the main stuff.
Yeah, I think that they're I don't know if they're adding stuff that I feel like we haven't kind of talked around.
Yeah,
in a way. I feel like again, I feel like again, Israel, another country run by the party of disappointed people.
Right, and like Kohler's the one guy saying like they're not going to learn any of the lessons from this, and everyone's like, "Shut up!" but it's like, and again, this is where the interesting thing about the time in this book is interesting because I think he's writing this in like the 60s, late 60s, maybe early 70s. But then Gass is writing this in like the 80s to 90s. So there's an interesting overlay of like Israel's politics you could work out if you wanted to during that time period. But
yeah. I mean, I think there's also something there. I think if there's something with the platyhelminthism section, and again, kind of the reflections on the state of Israel, I think it's again, in the same way, Kohler hasn't learned any of the lessons he could learn from his own life. He could theoretically learn to be kind, learn to be generous, learn to be nice to his kids. But instead he's just, become, if anything, worse than his own father, worse than the other people like he thinks shaped him.
I should note that platyhelminthists are flatworms. So I guess this is accusations of spinelessness is what I think you can read that title as. So, but
yeah, I feel like we've kind of talked through that though. So I don't know. Do we want to get on to our last section for
let's get on
the day
to why windows are important to me? So summary, in perhaps the most nostalgic chapter thus far, which we could argue, Kohler describes the childhood appeal of voyeurism, of the gaze, as it applies to oogling people through windows, reading books, and teaching in front of a chalkboard. He describes climbing into an access tunnel at work, which is depicted as one endless run-on paragraph. It may be the best sentence of the book, which I would like to read out loud, but maybe I'll save that for later. Kohler describes his theory that history is only present in things, in objects, and only through material residue are we remembered and preserved. And I want to note this theory is in marked contrast to Mad Meg, which we could talk about. In remembering his voyeuristic escapades as a student oogling a couple through a window, he draws a comparison between determining the historical truth of Herschel Greenspann's assassination of Nazi diplomat Ernst von Roth, which was the inciting incident for Kristallnacht. And this is compared, him trying to figure out what was going on historically, is compared to voyeurism. Not only is the study of history the study of language, as we've been looking at, it is also a voyeuristic act. This segues into a recollection of his participation in Kristallnacht, which we've hinted at in the previous episode, where it appears that he throws a brick through an already broken window. So I find this chapter to be fascinating because I think some of the writing in this is some of the best stuff, but it's in like a very particular, like nostalgic, phenomenological mood. Like, the reason I'm saying this is not to sound pretentious, but somebody published a syllabus that Gass taught. And he like specifically points out that this section was inspired by Gaston Bachelard's Poetics of Space, which in itself, I've already beaten this before in the Rilke episode, was inspired by a lot of Rilke. So there's a kind of really interesting overlay of various stuff happening in this section. What did you think of this section?
It's interesting. I mean, I guess I could say that about any of these sections. I, again, found myself thinking about not just like history, but again, I guess we could say like saying even like academic humanism at this point feels like a little bit like too narrow, but like culture as an act of voyeurism, knowing as an act of voyeurism, literature as an act of voyeurism.
I mean, that's basically what we're doing in this book is we're peeping on Kohler. So
no, I think you're right. And I think that I think that like voyeurism writ large is like just the act of looking at other people unseen is like a very deeply ingrained like human I guess, reflex. Like we have the mirror neurons. Like we get like pleasure out of watching people do things. But also like kind of crucially like imagining ourselves being the ones doing them.
Yeah.
That's like a pretty like fundamental part of being human. And it's like part of why we're good at the things we're good at. We're good at teaching each other things, and we're good at like learning like complex, like technical tasks. And yeah, literature in a way is kind of like the instrumentalizes that and turns it into a source of like aesthetic pleasure. And maybe we could say all the arts and like sciences do this to some degree. But Kohler clearly is grappling with his insecurity over this fact, his insecurity over his desire to look, his desire to see people. Because again, he is someone who is a fucking miserable bastard who's like put up all literal walls around himself and the rest of the world.
Well, there's a really interesting thing here with like we talked about feeling trapped in the previous thing, and it's almost like this is like the escape, and the escape is just like oogling people, doing history, staring at the carpet, which I want to get into in a minute, and like there's a way in which he escapes from his horrible existence, but also he is alleviated of like the idea of a self. Like there's a way in which like when you're oogling somebody, you're so into what they're doing that you almost don't have to worry about what you're doing. And I think like this isn't spelled out like explicitly, but like the part where he talks about like crawling into the closet as a kid and realizing that like nobody was looking at him is almost like this, like, yeah, like I'm free now, basically. Like nobody's watching me. I'm free. Like I can be who I want to be. And like, as someone who's, you know, enjoyed like reading as a way of escape, I was like identifying with this section a lot in a way that I found kind of uncomfortable. But I think that's part of the book. It's like, you know, because when he compares books to windows, but they're like windows that also reveal you, I think that's like a little bit better than just pure voyeurism. But the fact that they're all in this section is like, I think relevant because they're all like, that's the metaphor here.
Yeah, you know, Ben, I think it's really interesting the bit you just pointed out. Kohler going in the closet.
Yeah, and no one can see him. Yeah, so yeah,
it's interesting because like I'm not 100% sure that I like buy the idea that like Kohler is gay per se. Like, I'm not quite sure I've just seen like that in the book exactly, but he's clearly someone who is so repressed.
Yeah.
And has felt like he needs to hide his desires for so long and feels so unsafe with his desires for so long that like he might as well be.
Well, yeah, and I think too there's like an almost an instability there that he would rather not confront. Like he talks about his breasts a lot. One thing we haven't talked about because he's so overweight, he will frequently talk about his breasts, which I think he talks about more later.
Yeah, but there's kind of about fondling his own breasts, like in a very like erotic way.
Yeah, there's a way in which like I think this book only works if it's a first person narrator, because like I can't imagine trying to communicate this from a third point of view, like
it's
a third person.
It's too absurd.
But like when you do first person, like there's like an instability there that like you don't have to resolve, like you were saying, in one way or another, but like it's uncertain kind of. Yeah.
Well, and you also like Kohler doesn't literally have to have done everything he talks about.
Yeah, exactly.
Like there's this way in which, again, like the first person narration kind of like lets us kind of be in the world of someone who has like a very disordered, chaotic mind.
Yeah.
But like we don't need to see him doing everything literally. Like he can be thinking about doing things or imagining it, and it can still be fucked up. It can still be fucked up like he wants to do these things or he's thinking about it. We don't literally have to see him do that.
Yeah.
To like, because again, it would be absurd. Like it would be like the most like bizarro horror novel level stuff of like this gross man, like, yeah, like digging a hole in his basement and fondling himself and like thinking about, oogling co-eds, but also like being a child. Like there's too much. It's too much.
Well, and there's a way too in which like there's also a bit where when he's looking at the couple in the window while he's also working on the Greenspan historical case, he talks a lot about the guy's penis, like because it's like the only thing he can see in the window. There's like an interesting fixation on that because he can't quite see the woman and the couple in the window, but that's like part of his, fascination there. I do want to talk a little bit about the rug. So here's one of the reasons I suggested we read Notebooks of Maltalard's Brigga is because I think there's a very clear connection between this thing Rilke does and this thing he does with the rug. And I don't want to spend too much time on it, but I want to point out there's a bit in Notebooks where his mom holds up a bit of Italian lace. And Rilke says, first came strips of Italian work, robust pieces with drawn threads, in which everything was repeated over and again, as obviously as in a peasant's garden. Then, all at once, our gaze was confined, time and again, by a latticework of Venetian needlepoint, as though we were in cloisters or dungeons. But presently, we could see freely again, far out into gardens that grew more and more artificial, till all was dense and warm to the eyes as in a hothouse. Luxuriant plants, unfamiliar to us, spread out their immense leaves. Tendrils reached out for each other as if they were dizzy, and the great open blossoms of Points d'Alençon misted everything with their pollen. Suddenly, all weary and bewildered, we stepped out to the long bolt of Valenciennes, and it was nearly on a winter morning of hoarfrost. Then this keeps going. The cold affected us more and more closely till at length when we came to a tiny, exquisite pillow lace. Maman said, "Oh, now we shall get frost flowers on our eyes," which indeed we did, for we were very warm inside. Both of us sighed as we rolled up the lace again. It was a lengthy task, but we would not entrust it to anyone else. So Rilke describes him and his mom looking at a piece of Venetian lace, and then the paragraph like becomes this like phantasmagorical landscape of lace, basically. Then, if you compare this to Gass's version, which is much longer in a way that I think it's funny, I don't want to read all of it, but he says, with pencil and paper, drew mazes of brightly tangled hair you couldn't find your way in, wander through, or even scissor out of, and reread the design in our rugs as maps of unscalable mountains or impenetrable forests, sheer cliffs and fast rapids, lands gone without anyone's caring from all human view, swamps infested with moccasins, deserts where the wind blew solid sheets of sand in your eyes, and lead soldiers wandered in circles till they tipped over on their backs and died. Oceans in perpetual state of storm, whirlpools and murderous shoals, ice flows which crumpled ships like paper in an angry fist, quicksanded volcanoes, canyons, treacherous arroyos, waterfalls which disappeared in their own mists, and endless stretches of emptiness and cold, etc., etc., etc. So there's a way in which he like just lifts this idea of like staring at something as like a kid or a younger person and just it becoming like this landscape. And I think what to me is interesting about this idea is, as we've said, it's a way of Kohler being able to escape, but also like I think it's a way of like you were saying, like it's not all that different than like reading a book. Like the idea that you're reading a book and you're like transformed, it's just like a physical object versus like you were saying, like a work of culture. And again, I think this is a point where like Gass could have made this point, and he probably does in one of his essays, but it's interesting that like this odious, half man, like is making this like beautiful point about this experience. Like that's kind of related to what you were saying about like, what is humanism good for? So.
Yeah, I mean, it feels a little not contradictory, but I feel like it complicates kind of some of the stuff I've been saying a little bit too. And it's something that I'm going to kind of like make like a slight like digression again into like surprise psychoanalysis, and like something I find very, very like fascinating, but also like kind of beautiful about psychoanalysis. And that's like within like the psychoanalytic tradition, the mind is inexhaustible.
Yeah.
You could go to analysis every single day for 10 years, and you could try to talk exhaustively through every single thing that ever happened to you with your analyst. And at the end of that 10 years, you would still be finding new things.
Yeah.
Or reading things in new ways. Because at the end of the day, like it's self-narrative. Like there's no like singular truth you're ever going to reach. And like every single person in the world actually has like an interior self, which is that complicated.
Yeah, it's like that like tangled landscape on the carpet. Yeah.
Yeah, there might be differences in like how readily they're able to express it, or like through what metaphors and means they're able to describe it. Some people might be better at describing it in a way that, meets certain like aesthetic standards of beauty. But like everyone's interiority is equally as complicated. And I think that there is a degree to which this is true of texts. Like we're by the end of this probably going to spend somewhere between like 6 and 8 hours talking about the tunnel. That's about as long as we've talked about like any other text.
Yeah.
But despite that, we're going to miss stuff. Like you said, there are other people who've already done podcasts on the tunnel, and they're going to have talked about things we didn't talk about. We're going to talk about things they did talk about. In 100 years, people will still be talking about the tunnel, presumably, if there are still people around. And even trash literature, you can find interesting things to say about bad books. Maybe there's a slightly less true than like the human mind, but there is tons of interesting content we might out of reading something like Twilight, even if it's an aesthetically like repugnant experience.
Right. Yeah.
It's something that's both like fascinating and beautiful, but also kind of terrifying about human beings. And I think that, again, like, I think that's why people tend to, again, to kind of get back to like some of the other themes of this book, like that's why we tend to lean back on ethnic stereotypes and like looking at people like they're NPCs, because like that is a lot easier than looking at another person and being like, your interiority is just as like complicated and meaningful as mine is. And that's frightening.
Well, and in like some sense, like unknowable, like you were saying, like you can come to more awareness and realization of how things work, but there's not going to be like, the center of the maze or something. Like,
there's no there.
Yeah. Gertrude Stein. Yeah. So, yeah.
Yeah. And I think that I don't know if Gass was intending to do this on purpose, and I don't know. I'm sure there are plenty of people who've written about the tunnel and psychoanalysis. I have not had time to track down any papers to that effect, but there is this level in which I feel like it feels like a very psychoanalytically informed text to me.
Yeah.
And this is like a place where I feel like I see that coming out.
Yeah. And I mean, I also think too, like you were saying, when he's like going from the window to all those primary documents about grid spawn, and then he even reads a possible homoerotic intent between them, like him shooting the Russian diplomat. I don't even know if that's true. I haven't looked it up, but like even that like movement, I think, is like you were saying, in terms of like trying to ascribe some way of understanding of events and people in a way that is like them, even if, like psychoanalyst says, like they can't be reduced to like one drive or motive or intent. So
yeah. Woof.
Yeah. I as a way to chase this, John, here's a quote from Stephen King about voyeurism. This is from a story called Why We're in Vietnam. Well, let's see. We're the generation that invented Super Mario Brothers, the ATV, laser missile guided systems, and crack cocaine. We discovered Richard Simmons, Scott Peck, and Martha Stewart living. Our idea of a major lifestyle change is buying a dog. The girls who burn their bras now buy their lingerie from Victoria's Secret, and the boys who fucked fearlessly for peace are now fat guys who sit in front of their computer screens at night pulling their puddings while they look at pictures of naked 18-year-olds on the internet. That's us, brother. We like to watch movies, video games, live car chase footage, fistfights on the Jerry Springer Show, Mark McGuire, World Federation Wrestling, impeachment hearings. We don't care. We just like to watch. But there was a time, don't laugh, but there was a time when it was really all in our hands. Do you know that? You know the price of selling out the future, Sully John. You can never really leave the past. You never get over. I thought of that quote very strongly, as like you were saying, as well as this voyeurism thing, where I think King is blaming voyeurism on the boomers, but I think, as you were saying, like it's kind of like a human thing to just be voyeuristic. Whether or not like we can reduce it to an entire generation is another thing. No, but I also just like contrasting the way King makes his points versus Gass. Like the thing about pulling their puddings, like look at pictures of 18 years on the internet. Like that's just as eloquent to me. It's just kind of eloquent in like a crass way, which I find
it's a little folksier.
Yeah, exactly. But
that's interesting, Ben. I agree with you. I think that I heard someone recently kind of talking about generational discourse.
Oh boy. Yeah.
And kind of talking about how disappointed they kind of felt that like millennials didn't get their shit together and like make the world better for like the next generations. And like now it's kind of up to like the Zoomers, I guess, or it's up to Gen Alpha or whatever. And I've always found myself a little frustrated with that line of thinking because it seems to like every generation feels that way, it seems like. And it's kind of like it feels like an abdication of responsibility to me in some way. It feels like a thing where it's like you decide that like your life hits a certain level of like comfort or respectability, and it's like, well, certainly I can't give anything up. Certainly I just have to watch someone else do this for me because I'm old. And somehow like old keeps getting like cranked down a little further to like, oh, I'm 35. I'm too old to change the world. I'm too old to see the world get better before I die. And it's like, I don't know, man. I personally would like to think the world will get better before I die. I hope that, and I think it's interesting, Gas quotes the ending of Middlemarch.
Yeah, he does. Here. Yeah. Custodian of little lives. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm again, like no one thinks that they're doing history. No one thinks that they're again, the only people who do are people who are kind of self-consciously aping it.
Yeah.
Or or are like making very deliberate choices to like try to do that in the way that maybe like the Bolsheviks did. Say what you will about, the eventual like endpoint of that project. Not what we're here to talk about.
Right. But being like a subject of history. Yeah.
Yeah. No one thinks they're in the driver's seat. Everyone feels like they're faking it. I think about, the way that like, I feel like it's been a big discourse with like people our age for a long time. It's like, oh, no one feels like they, imposter syndrome. Everyone's like, oh, I don't really feel like I am what I am. And I find myself thinking about this sometimes. I find myself wondering, kind of like, think about like the New Deal, for instance, and like kind of the way like all these like new jobs just kind of got pulled out of the ether by the federal government. And it's like, oh, you're head of the Department of the Public Arts Department. I don't know, whatever. They invented like 50,000 new departments. And like no one had ever had that job before.
Yeah.
Was that guy like, oh, I'm locked in. I'm going to do this. I'm this now. Or were they like, oh man, I don't really know if I can do this. What if we fuck it up? What if we lose? What if I've
never done public art before. Yeah.
Like looking back at history takes doubt out of the equation.
Yeah.
Takes like the actual interiority out of the equation for people sometimes. And sometimes like that's necessary. Sometimes, again, we're not doing great man history.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter like what the guy running the like department of unfucking the economy like personally thought about like his role doing that. And like if he was comfortable in it, he did it. And like, I think that that's more common than maybe we want to believe. And also sometimes if people think the other way, it gets scary.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Like, again, I was joking with my brother recently about like Iron Age, like Mesopotamian kings and how like some guy would, some like 5 guys would like conquer a village of like 3 guys. And then the like leader of the 5 guys would be like, I am God of the universe, king of all creation, all 4 corners bow to me. And it's like, he controls like 2 square acres of territory.
You must pay fealty to me. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. I feel like we're getting a little off the topic of the book itself here. And I apologize for getting us a little like to the winds, but like, yeah, there's something here about like doubt and history and like where the individual fits into that. And I think maybe this is a way to like get into like talking about Kohler's crystal knocked memories.
Yeah.
And like what's going on there, because that's clearly like a primal scene for him.
Yes. Yeah, I think so.
And again, these questions of culpability and what was he trying to do there? What did he do there? What does he remember doing there? What is that memory maybe concealing? You know what I'm saying? There's a lot to talk about here that I think maybe we can tie into this broader question we're talking about.
Well, so the thing about what he did on Crystal Knock is quite unclear to me because, like, I'm trying to find it. He definitely, again, throws a brick, but the question is whether or not he breaks a window or not is something that he doesn't answer directly. Because he says, near the end of the street was a small shop whose facade stirred in me obscurely favorable memories. I wrote sweets next to that. So I gave it my stone as if stones were a standard gift on these occasions. Then a wave of chocolate drifted out from the confectioner's confining cases a bunch of us immediately violated. Although I was fearful of being scratched, I stuffed a few sweets in my pocket. My friends filled their pockets too. One said to me, I come here sometimes, and I don't think this place is kosher. Hey, we all said. We got the hell out of there. So they steal candy from, like a German shop. And then, where's the part about the... Yeah, he says this is sort of like a one of the things we haven't talked about that I love that Gass does is he will quicken the rhythm when he gets to the end of a chapter. It's a really great way of like having like a rhythmic climax that's also like the point of the chapter. And he says, I'm just going to read this whole section because there's no real good way of summarizing it. I am slow to wit. Only now do I understand why I waited in that kitchen, dark and empty, each of us, me and the net, moment after moment, waited without otherwise passing the time by playing a tune in my head or displaying an image I treasured or raising a thought I could worry. I was waiting for my life, waiting for it. When the window went blank again, so immediately too, the lifespan of a spark, I was erased like a former time. Hence I stood as a cup sits, to be filled open-mouthed, roundly lipped, of a small space, a pure pool. During the second showing, there was not a single chair in sight. That's right. My God. And the bolsters, where were they? The rug was fulvous, not a color I remember from the first time. Was the wall papered or painted? The bed was made of metal. Was it? Shit. That the coverless pillow was gone should call for no comment. Could I feel sure it was the same generally featureless space I was spying my spying in? With Greenspan in one scene, Turk in the other, boy in one bed, woman instead? One of me watching, one room, another? I'm slow to wit. Only now do I comprehend. What? It. I watched, read. I waited for a reassuring sight of a life lonelier than my own, more sordid, tasteless, tepid, thin, fearful of enjoying joy, accepting my explanation that was denigration, accepting only the V in virtue, and in that brutal way getting the V in vice right. I remember my relief when my paving block broke the pane of that second shop, the shop of a goy. You see, I said to my cold soul, for my part, it wasn't just Jews. So there's something there where like he talks about throwing a window and then he's like, why was I staring at that couple in the window? And he was like, I was waiting for my happiness to happen. Like if I was looking at somebody, I would be happy. And then he's like, actually, I throw the brick. It goes through the window. It's not even, it's just a random guy's shop. It's not even a hate crime. And he goes, you see, I hate everybody equally, which again feels like it's not exactly what happened, but it feels again like I'm an equal opportunity guy that hates people. But I don't know. I'm somewhat moved by his point about like I'm looking for other, like I'm looking to not have imposter syndrome, even though he doesn't have imposter syndrome. Like I'm looking for my happiness to happen in these other people, and then it doesn't. So,
yeah, it's interesting. I don't know why it's such a trite thing to say. I'm thinking back on my little jape about Nietzsche earlier. And obviously, a lot of Nazis reading Nietzsche, perhaps we'll be generous and say misinterpreting Nietzsche.
Yeah.
But this section makes me think about kind of, again, like this idea of like master morality in Nietzsche, the blonde beast roving across the plains, doing what he will, taking what he wants. And there's this way in which like Polar, I don't want to say is like has that exactly in mind. But again, there's this idea of like, I'm being active. I'm being in the mix. You know, there's we did talk about it in the Mad Meg section. There's this whole thing where like Mad Meg gives him this long diatribe about like, be active, be out in the world. Don't be like me.
Study
don't
present history.
Yeah. Yeah. Be history. Don't like just think about it. Don't just write about it. And like, this is Kohler trying to do that. And there's this way in which like, I don't want to say it's admirable, obviously. That's not what I mean at all. But like, he's trying to find a way to like be happy. He's trying to find a way to feel like he's living his own life, like he's not stuck in his own head. He's not being neurotic. And it ends up being really stupid and causing him to do something horrible that is clearly like tormented him for years. Like he clearly, genuinely, I think, feels really bad about this.
Well, yeah,
like, participation.
And the way that he kind of, it's almost like he's addressing somebody at the end there. Like, you see, like, I hate everybody equally. I'm not actually a racist. Like, at least that's what it's like the very last thing he says, basically, not like, and it was great. It's more just like I look, I'm cool. Even though, like, again, he's like you were saying, this is one of the primal scenes I would say in the book is his participation in this event, even if it is like, if we were to believe what happened, kind of insignificant. So,
but like I think about like the way that this scene starts, where it's just like it's him and the boys, and they're hanging around, they're goofing off, and like unfortunately, if you look at the grand scope of human history, a lot of horrible things happen when the boys get together and start goofing off under particular circumstances.
I feel like that was the thrust of Nolan's Odyssey, was that the boys should be punished for goofing off. Yeah, so and maybe they should anyway. But yeah, so
maybe they should.
Yeah,
but like, there's a way in which like you could imagine a slightly different version of the scene where like they're just hanging out.
Yeah,
or maybe they just steal some candy, but it's a different day.
Yeah,
and like, it's not part of Crystal Locked.
Right.
And like maybe Kohler would have like some complicated feelings about stealing because, you know, stealing is bad. But like he'd have complicated feelings about it the way I have complicated feelings about like underage drinking.
Right.
Like, wasn't good, but it wasn't that like I'm not tormenting myself over it. But there's something about kind of like the way you get like, you're in like, again, no one thinks there's something in history, but if you are, boy howdy, you're in for a bad time.
Well, yeah, it's like, are you responsible? like how responsible is Kohler for Crystal Knocked, given this small act? And like that also seems to be a big question of the book, because there's that long bit where he's talking about in this chapter about like, what is the straw that breaks the camel's back? Like, do you remember that part where he's like talking about like them getting piled over and over, and like he says it's not the straw's responsibility. like again, I'm abdicating any responsibility for what I did, but he's still guilty about it. Or they're like, why have this, you know, this weird address to this unseen interlocutor? But
well, there's something again about kind of his discussion of like the event that leads up to Crystal Knock, this assassination, and like kind of trying to play it out as a drama. You know, he again kind of has this implication like, oh, maybe they were secret gay lovers,
right? Yeah,
and like that's why it happened. Like kind of trying to make it about something else, because like otherwise it has to be about what it is about, which is about someone kind of desperately trying to kill a Nazi to, like, again, very classic, like, propaganda of the deed, which unfortunately is not an effective tactic historically, but one that I can see how people reach that point.
Well,
I'll say.
And the contrast is somebody who, did something, no matter how, unguided and leading to greater calamity. That Greenspan still acted, which is what Kohler is like, unable to do or tries to do.
And I think there's something there too about like, if it hadn't been this, it would have been something else.
Yeah.
Like it's not as though like Kristallnacht was not like the first blush of anti-Semitism. It was an excuse.
Right. Yeah.
To go on a rampage. Definitely found myself thinking, maybe at the time they could have come up with a song if I'd been there, and it would have been like, "We are Ernst von Rom. We carry the flame."
I mean, I imagine that they must have had Third Reich slop. I mean, yeah, it's kind of, that must have been a thing. So
but real songwriters were getting paid to produce that slop then. It wasn't just a robot.
Yeah, that would be worth looking up. Like, were there things like that? Because there must be. Yeah. So.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. It was Slop World before Slop World.
But like, I like what I think, to me, the generational discourse thing you brought up, I think is interesting, because I feel like placing the responsibility on another generation is like almost the same as blaming them. It's just like, it's like, you figure it out. And so like, I think like there's a way in which I think Gass is talking about ways that we are like voyeuristic as a way of getting some answer to why we're unhappy. Like, it's a similar kind of responsibility thing. Like, maybe if I see like a hot woman, like I'll feel good. Like, which sounds weird when I'm saying that, but I feel like that's kind of what like some of the voyeurist thing is happening. And I also think it's crazy to imagine him like trying to write about like that murder, like literally as it was happening. Like if you think about him sitting in that apartment, like with the most primary documents he could get his hands on, and then like looking up into the window and just like seeing a couple maybe having sex, like, but he doesn't even see anything. So
he imagines something.
Yeah. I find, again, like that sort of fearful of coming joy thing to be very tragic, and, makes me think of, again, the like escaping into the carpet because you're, you can't do it anywhere else. So.
Yeah. No, I mean, I don't want to like Kohler, and I don't like Kohler.
Yeah.
But I think Gass does, at the very least, like a good job of like portraying this man's psychology and kind of getting you to like see how he got here without telling you like it's okay that he did that. None of this is justifying.
Yes.
But it is explanatory. And that feels like an important distinction.
I mean, I also think that's kind of a psychoanalytic one too. Would you say that?
Oh,
yeah.
I would agree.
Yeah, because like, again, it's not justifying, it's explaining. So
yeah. I mean, I'm not going to say there are no analysts in the world who would tell Kohler like, oh, it's fine that you did that. Obviously, not the case, unfortunately, for better or worse. But like, I think, the better angels of psychoanalysis, as far as my understanding of it goes, which is still somewhat limited, would be like, well, it was fucked up you did that. Well, let's see if we can figure out why, so you don't do something like that again.
Yeah. But I mean, I think like, Kohler maybe hasn't done that until he read about it, and then he's interpreting it as informing like what he does as a historian, basically. So
I think he's been subliminating all of it. He's been subliminating it into his work. He's been trying to come up with like, I feel bad about this thing I did. How do I absolve all of Nazism so that I don't have to feel bad? Because again, there's something really interesting, and it isn't like a particularly deep part of the book, but I find Kohler's instances of anti-Semitism to be really telling, because it's so cartoonish. And you can tell, like, it is, again, it's the socialism of fools, as Adorno and Horkheimer say. Like, it is not, like, it is clearly something he just keeps telling himself, like, Jews suck. Because like the alternative is to, again, confront what he did. It's easier if he just keeps treating these people like cartoon characters.
Well, and also there's a way in which there's kind of like an erotic charge to it, like we already talked about.
Absolutely.
And then like the way, do you remember that scene where he's like dirty talking about Jewish people, like to his wife, presumably in their bed? Yes. And it's just like, it's like, ugh, like it's gross, but also like you were saying, it's cartoonish at the same time. Like,
yeah. And there's this element of like humor there, like not good humor, but attempts at humor. Or again, like we haven't even talked about this yet. We really haven't talked about Lou much in this section, despite her kind of being present throughout these chapters you read. There's the part where he's eating her out and he tells her that she tastes like the Third Reich.
I forgot about that. That's God, yeah.
Which is
red flags. Yeah, so
I just don't even know what to make of that.
There's a way in which sometimes I don't believe the Lou relationship even happened. Like, I don't think it's worth it to say, like, did X or Y really happen, as well as this is like, is there instability there? Like, and there's like almost an instability with like how perfect their relationship was, and then how like he threw it away, because she hates his mind, even though he's like absolved of any responsibility. But
yeah, it really, to me, reads as like, if it happened, like Kohler almost certainly, like, probably did not fuck it up like in quite so dramatic a fashion, but fucked it up like in a more quotidian way.
Yeah.
And probably like it was like some kind of self-sabotage, because the idea of like actually having any kind of happiness, however like temporary and unstable, was like too scary for him.
Yeah, better to imagine a scene where he is broken up with in a public place and then trips over a dog leash and then yells at the dog. Like, so.
Well, again, there's something here. I'm finding myself perhaps again, like not surprisingly thinking about like internet Nazis.
Yeah.
And this way in which like they build up these elaborate fantasies of like what would happen if they talked to a girl.
Yeah.
How the blue-haired SJW would like be immediately disgusted by them and would, tell them off, and like their response is either to fantasize about killing that person or to say that like, well, I didn't really want it anyway.
Right. Yeah.
Like, why would I want to date some dumb, SJW? And it's like, okay, so what you've done is you've foreclosed the option of anything actually happening, so you can fantasize about like being cool.
I mean, and that's kind of what I feel like the Lou stuff is about, in terms of just like writing the perfect ending so that I don't have to like think about whatever actually happened, so
like there's a way in which like I imagine Kohler like in real life, like not in our real life, but like in the real life of the book. And there's this way in which like I think he probably is actually like does not come across like a freak, like if you are like his coworker.
Yeah.
He probably comes across like a really boring, maybe kind of like curmudgeonly guy.
Maybe he gets like, worked up, so
maybe, but like not in like this like highfalutin way he is doing it here. Like it's like he blows up at somebody and like says something inflammatory, but like he's not impressive in his anger. Like I think that like my belief, and I agree with you, I think that like asking what is real and what isn't in this book is missing the point. I think that Gass is really like not interested in like what actually happened so much as like how Kohler views his own life and his own history.
Yeah.
But like I imagine Kohler as actually probably very boring if you know him in real life.
Right. Yeah.
But like under the surface is all this seething, chaotic, destructive energy that like he cannot express in real life because he's so repressed.
Yeah.
And so he imagines these scenarios of like, what if I did do it?
Yeah.
What if I did fucking hang Culp? What if I did tell the like 18-year-old that I'm oogling in class that her pussy tastes like the Third Reich? Wouldn't that be fucked up?
Yeah.
Wouldn't everyone have to like see my pain?
Yeah, me and my insane mind. Yeah,
me and my insane mind.
Yeah,
he doesn't have an Alan to come over and hang out with him and drink diet soda and play Burnout 3 on the PS2.
Honestly, I can imagine the relationship being like Kohler, the landlord, and then Alan is just like Herschel or something. like, so what about me, Herschel? Yeah, he's just like doing the weird like sophist argument at him, like,
wearing a suicide vest.
Yeah. And then Herschel's like, I don't think you believe in anything, and then he's just like, oh, like yeah, like.
Yeah, seppuku right there.
I've dishonored my family. Yeah, so. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. This is what I'm saying. Like, I feel like these three parts are like some of the most like everything seems to be firing on all cylinders in these in this section of the book. So
yeah, it feels like we've really like hit cruising altitude in a way that feels very good to me. Because I wasn't feeling bad after the first three sections, but I was just feeling like, how am I gonna like handle like 4 episodes of just like being just whipped back and forth the whole time.
Yeah, and I think it's funny that Gass was like talking about how like he wrote it that way to kind of test your patience on purpose. And like people on Twitter were like, that's so conceited. And I'm like, well, I mean, he kind of has a point. like I don't know. Like
absolutely.
Yeah.
Like this is a different like tangent, I guess, but like it's okay if you don't like the tunnel. It's okay if you bounce off it. It's not for you.
Yeah.
Sometimes things aren't for you, and that's okay. Anyway,
the tunnel. Any further thoughts? Lou. I know we didn't talk about Lou. I felt like, well, like you were saying earlier, sometimes you can't talk about everything. But again, Lou's presence, I think, is important. And like, I even have a whole thing I could say about like the way he focuses on objects during that scene. Like he remembers the strip of cellophane she rips off the cigarette pack as like a way of like escaping what's happening, basically. Like, yeah.
Or he's lying to us and like that's his way of like building out the scene so that we think it actually happened.
The just right detail. Yeah. So,
yeah. I was reading a thing recently about like a crime case, and someone was like, yeah, if someone tells you a story that has too many sensory details, it's actually more likely it's a lie because you wouldn't actually remember those things in real life.
Well, that's so great though, because like that's good fiction writing. It's having sensory details.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I definitely, again, the gender stuff is still like very present for me, and the sexuality stuff. I think that Kohler it has like built up these like imagos of women in his head that like he wants, but like feels like he can't have, probably couldn't have.
Yeah.
Maybe again, this is a little more true of like the German nightclub singer than Lou, but it's this escape from the fact that he's miserable and not attracted to his wife anymore.
Yeah.
Which like, obviously no one is entitled to a relationship with a beautiful person, especially if they're someone who clearly puts as little effort into their appearance as Kohler does. But like, you know, again, it's this thing of like desire, repression. He feels like he knows what he wants, but feels like he can't have it. And so everything is just about frustration and disappointment.
Yeah.
And like, again, while I find Kohler to be a repulsive character, there's something that feels very genuinely human in that, in a way that like feels very refreshing, feels like something that even like a lot of well-written fiction does not fully grapple with. The fact that we do spend most of our lives feeling thwarted and resentful and disappointed for some reasons that are justified, some reasons that aren't.
Right. Yeah. Well, that's what to me is so crazy about the tunnel, is like making that the kind of common thread, you know, just like you felt resentment and disappointment too, but are you this, you know? So, yeah.
Could you be?
Yeah. Could you be? Yeah.
What would it take to get you here?
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's interesting. I tired of saying that. That's just like verbal filler.
This is what I'm saying,
Anyway.
John. The tunnel drives one to madness, attempting to talk coherently about the tunnel. I think it's because it's so like written Like not like not like the best way it's written, but like the way it's written just makes you realize like how bad your prose is, like in comparison to what he's doing.
The prose of your own internal monologue.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it pales in comparison. And like I was saying at the beginning, I just sound like a hype piece going like, I always keep it on me, and I just pull out the tunnel. Like, yeah. So, but yeah.
But I think there's something there too about like the fact that like I think this book kind of wants to make you feel complicit.
Yeah,
it wants you to kind of be like, am I like Kohler? What would it take for me to get to be like Kohler? Does everyone have a Kohler inside of them?
Yeah,
I would argue yes. That's the fascism of the heart.
Yeah,
again, like, and I'm not saying Gas needs to do this, but again, it does not really posit like a way out of that.
And I mean,
I don't know. I don't think that's what Gas is interested in. I don't think that's what he's trying to do here, but I feel like that's something to think about.
Yeah, I think that's something to think about further because we've got like half the book to go basically. So
yeah. Not that it's like our job to figure that out.
Well, a brief answer I'll give is I think this book is really big on absent presences, I think, because it's like a 90s, like postmodern, play of opposites thing. But I think there's a way in which the fact that we can read this book and Gas can write it is a way out, even if it's not a solution. Because I don't know if there's one inside of it, but just the present object and the experience of it, I think, is one possible solution.
I think there's something there. Something there. I think that's a theme we'll probably develop as we go here. So, well, listeners, thank you for joining us for part 2 on The Tunnel. We'll be back in 2 weeks to discuss Possession by A.S. Byatt. Then 2 weeks after that, we'll be back with part 3. So we hope you'll join us for both of those. Other than that, I can't really think of any other show business we need to talk about.
Yeah, give us a follow on YouTube, Spotify, or where you get your podcasts.
Yeah, give us a 5-star rating. Leave a text review saying how sexy you imagine we are based on how our voices sound. Yeah, we'd really appreciate it. Well, Ben, been real.
Yeah.
Hope you have a good night. Stay cool.
Till next time.
Semper Books.
Semper Books.
Thank you for listening to The Infinite Library. If you liked our show, we hope you'll subscribe and leave us a review on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or the podcast app of your choice. It helps us a lot. If you want to follow us on social media, we can be found on Twitter, Instagram, and Blue Sky at Infinite Library Pod. If you'd like to contact our team directly with episode ideas or feedback, email us at infinitelibrarypod@gmail.com. Our intro music is by Amos Legend in the Forest of Mayhem. Our outro music is by DJ Daggy Diggs, and our logo was created by Lars Noir.